Chapter 3. By the time Sandra reached the age of 13, she had solved her lunch money problem. She knew how to steal now. She had been caught 5 times in the past 3 years, but it didn't disturb her once she knew what would happen. Most of the time they'd turn her loose in the store after talking to her. Only one time had they taken her down to juvenile, and since they'd had so much trouble trying to reach her mother, the police women had just given up and sent her home. It wouldn't have made any difference whether or not they'd given her car fare, because she now knew how to stick her finger out and get a ride. With the short skirts she wore, no man would mistake her for a boy, even though she wore her hair in a short natural. When a stranger met Sandra, he or she was not overwhelmed by any sign of intellectual maturity. But on the other hand, she was a product of circumstances, which had been hard and were still hard. She still skipped school whenever she felt like it, not because of lunch money or hunger. Now it was because she wanted the time to go downtown and hustle the stores. Inside of her there was a driving desire to accumulate a large bankroll. She had a morbid fear of being completely broke. She hoarded money as if it might disappear. She would never allow herself to spend her last dollar. She always kept at least $2 or $3 hidden under her mattress at home. It was abnormal for a child of that age to be so concerned with money, but if she hadn't taken an interest in her own money affairs, she would have starved to death because her mother just didn't care. Or if she cared, she didn't stay sober long enough to follow up her good intentions. Sandra jumped out of the car on Western and waved merrily at the young brother who had given her the lift all the way from Hollywood and Vine to 38th Street and Western. She clutched the bag to her. Inside was the short leather coat a young prostitute had been worrying her to get. The price tag was $65, so she figured on making at least $30 off the white coat. As she attempted to cross the street, a Cadillac came tearing around the corner. As she jumped back out of the way, the rider on the passenger side tossed a package out the window. As she watched the package roll under a parked car, she almost got run over by a police car that came roaring around the corner behind the Cadillac. Dope. The word exploded in her head as she rushed over and reached under the car for the package. Some of the onlookers watched her curiously as she straightened back up, but she didn't care. She had what she wanted, even though she didn't really know what was in the small brown package. She rushed down the street wanting to get away before the men in the Cadillac came back and tried to redeem their package. The little white skirt she wore flapped up high against her butt as she took long steps, putting as much distance between her and that corner as she could. She stopped on 41st Street and delivered the leather coat. "Honey, I ain't got but $25 in the house," the young blonde prostitute stated, slowly fingering the soft leather. If it hadn't been for the package that was burning her pocket, Sandra would never have left the jacket. But now all she wanted to do was get home and see what she had. "Okay, I'll let it go for that this time, but don't do that no more. If you state a price, I look for you to pay it if I get the piece you want," Sandra warned the girl coldly. As Sandra let herself out of the woman's apartment, she overheard the girl say to her pimp, who had been watching the transaction, "That's gonna be one cold-hearted bitch when she gets older." "She'd be a bad bitch for somebody if she wasn't so damn young," the pimp replied loudly. "Give her a couple more years, and I might shoot at her myself." When Sandra reached the street, she took the back way. She hurried down to Van Ness and started walking. A young brother drove past slowly. His car broke down in the back, showing that he was a lowrider. He gave her the eye, and she stuck out her hand. He quickly slammed on his brakes and waited for her. She ran out to the car and jumped in. As soon as he got a close look at her, he cursed. "Shit, I thought you were older, baby. You ain't hardly over 12, are you?" I'm 16, she lied quickly. But if you don't want to give me the lift, that's up to you. She didn't make any attempt to get out, though. He grinned. 16, my ass. If you're a day over 14, I'll give you some cash. She didn't understand what he meant, but she replied, Look, man, if you want, I'll pay you for the ride. How about that? You got some cash, honey? He asked quickly. Then he pulled into a gas station. How much gas should I get? He asked and grinned. Sandra removed a $5 bill. How about $2 worth? She inquired. She wasn't frightened of him. She was used to dealing with young men. He didn't seem to be over 18. She stared at him with her large eyes. She had the same eyes her mother had, large bedroom eyes. He looked away. Sure, baby, $2 would be fine. He started to say something else, but the arrival of the gas station attendant interrupted him. Would you stop and let me pick up the Temptations' latest album at the record shop? She asked lightly, not really caring if he stopped or not. He hesitated briefly, then introduced himself. Most of my friends call me Fast Eddie, honey. What do they call you? Sandra, she replied, not bothering to offer any other information. Well, Sandy, he began, but she interrupted sharply. It ain't no Sandy, mister. It's Sandra. Her voice was sharp. Eddie glanced at her quickly. Damn, baby, I do believe you are 16. Ain't no kid gonna speak to no man in that tone of voice. In fact, he added, when I use that tone, I'm either speaking to my dog or to someone I don't like. I'm sorry, she stated, then continued, I just don't like for anyone to call me Sandy. That's my mother's name, and I don't want to use her name no way, no kind of way, if you know what I mean. All right, Eddie said easily. It don't make me no kind of difference one way or the other. What I'm interested in is what you going to give me for taking you to the record shop, then taking you home. How about if you just keep the change from the $5 bill? Would that be all right? Eddie shrugged his wide shoulders. That's cool with me, he stated, as he mentally counted the money he had in his pocket. He realized quickly that he'd still be $3 short on his fix money. Well, he reasoned, $3 was easier to hustle up than the whole $10 that he needed every day. After Sandra picked up her record, Eddie dropped her off at the dilapidated tenant building that she stayed in. He glanced at the building and commented, Your landlord must have something against paint, huh? She hadn't understood what he meant, and as she turned and stared up at him, he just shrugged his shoulders as he realized that she hadn't understood. That's okay, baby, he said lightly. If it doesn't bother you, it sure ain't no sweat off my nuts. Again, she didn't understand him. At school, the teachers thought she was a truculent child in some instances, and in others they just believed she was a half-wit. But in both cases, they were wrong. What Sandra did in school was all for a reason. Ever since she had been sent to school in clothes that made the other kids laugh, she had started to pretend that she was retarded, so that she wouldn't be called on and made to stand in front of the whole class. What she had started continued to follow her as she went through school. The teachers expected it from her, so they didn't disturb her. Some of them even believed she couldn't read, while many of her classmates knew that she skipped school sometimes so that she could go sit in the public library and read all day. What the teachers didn't realize was the fact that she had been so ashamed of the other kids' comments that she had developed a protective schizophrenia to meet the problem. When called on by a teacher to stand up and speak, she spoke in a low voice and ran her words together so that no one could really understand what she was saying. It became so exasperating that the teacher would stop calling on her. But now, as she sat in the car in front of her house listening to Eddie and not understanding what he meant, she wondered if she was really dumb. She was not pretending illiteracy now. She just couldn't understand what he meant. Okay, baby, he said as she opened the car door. "I'll be seeing you around." As soon as she got out, he pulled off, not realizing that he had left a mixed-up child behind. But what she couldn't understand was his cold remark about the building she stayed in. She didn't have any standards to go by. Every place she had ever lived in had been run down. She didn't understand anything about a ghetto because she had never lived in anything but a ghetto. Her world was small, and being an only child, she had no one to talk to. She lived in her books, the ones she stole from the library. They were her real world. When Sandra reached her apartment, she could hear the noise coming from inside. Her mother was entertaining again. For a second she wasn't going to go in, but then she remembered the package she had picked up. She opened the door and entered. Couples danced together, closely, as the record player blasted out the latest hit. Sandy spotted her daughter as soon as she entered. Noticing the album she carried, Sandy rushed over. "What's that you're carrying?" she asked loudly. Sandra passed over the new album and continued on into her bedroom. She didn't feel like arguing with her mother today. In a minute, the sound of the new album filled the apartment. Sandra sat on the bed and opened the package. A number of small balloons rolled out. Each one contained something. Now she knew it was dope. She counted the balloons. There were 20 of them. She didn't even bother to open one. She had seen the boys at school open one up and snort the white stuff that was inside the balloon. She carried the package to her closet and hid it way in the back where she knew her mother would never find it. Then she quickly forgot about it. There was too much noise coming from the group of adults, so she changed clothes quickly and left. Her mother didn't bother to inquire as to where she was going, because she didn't really care. Sandy knew that her daughter was stealing, even though Sandra had never told her that she was. But from the clothes she brought home, her mother knew. But as long as her daughter continued to bring her a dress home now and then, it didn't make any difference. If she ended up in reform school, it was her own problem, not Sandy's. That was the way her mother looked at it. After Sandra left the house, she walked around, aimlessly, until she found herself in front of Sammy's store. He grinned at her as she came in and bought a pop and cake. "Hey, Sandra," he said on the spur of the moment. "How'd you like a job in the store in the evenings after school?" He was surprised at his own question. One moment he was thinking that she was growing up, looking nice in her neat little skirt, and the next moment he was offering her a job. "Sure, Sammy," she replied quickly. "I'd like that fine." Frequently things happen in life that will change the future of a person. This was to be a big step in Sandra's life, one she would always remember. In the following week, Sandra would show up at the store with her school books in her arms. Sammy's wife would sometimes be in the store, and on those days, she would take Sandra in the back of the store and both of them would study Sandra's English book. Sammy's wife was from the old country and wanted to learn to speak English, so Sandra helped her. But in helping, she helped herself. In a matter of a month, there was an astonishing change that took place in Sandra. Even her teachers couldn't believe it. In fact, they didn't want to believe that what they had been so sure was a half-witted child was actually one with an agile mind. One reason for the abrupt change was that Sandra didn't have anything to be ashamed of anymore. Her clothes were as good or better now than most of the girls in the class. So she wasn't ashamed to stand up in front of the class and recite. Only now, instead of saying, "If'n, eatin', or show 'em," she spoke perfect English. Clear, bright, and articulate was Sandra's speech, but it shouldn't have surprised anyone, because she was a voracious reader. Actually, the only ones surprised were her school teachers, because her schoolmates had known all along that Sandra was anything but dumb. One Friday when Sandra showed up for work, Sammy came quickly from behind the counter. "Come, I want to show you something," he said, and led her from the store, leaving his wife in charge. He took her to the nearest bank and showed her how to open an account. Since it was payday for her, he put $5 in her account. When Sandra left the bank, her eyes were bright. She had found a new experience in life, something that would always keep the fear of hunger at bay. As long as she had money in the bank, she'd never have to worry, she reasoned. As they left the bank, Sammy glanced down at her and grinned. He knew her mother was starting to take most of her paycheck, so he'd decided to show her how to put her money where her own mother couldn't reach it. He didn't realize just how much of a problem he had solved for Sandra.